Shalom, everyone. This is another reading of English derived from the Hebrew. We are on chapter 2, section 1, covering vegetables. It says, I am now to give instances in which our names for members of the vegetable kingdom are derived from the Hebrew. Let us notice first the word shrub, which is derived from the Hebrew zarub, Zion resh beit, signifying to be straightened, the shrub being smaller than the tree. The Latin word for leaf is folium, the Greek follin, the French follet. We have ourselves adopted the word trefoil or the three-leaved plant. This word is derived from the Hebrew oli, ayin lamed yod. The Hebrew letter ayin, which this is a modern Hebrew character right here, they call it the Babylonian flame letters or the Chaldean letters. It's what came about after the Babylonian captivity, what they picked up while they were in Babylon. And when they came back, they used these characters, this font, instead of the original Paleo. And it says the Hebrew letter ayin is very peculiar, and when transferred into other languages, often takes before it what grammarians call the digamma, or F, in place of aspiration. And the digamma is the sixth letter of the Greek alphabet. It takes the position of the wa in the Hebrew. This letter was originally dropped from ancient Greek, and you can still see the evidence for that today because they use their letters like the aleph bet, where the aleph is one, the alpha is also one, and they go one, two, three, four, five, then seven because this letter is skipped. But either way, it says that often the ayin takes the F in the beginning of it for many of the words. It says this then gives us the Latin folium together with the Greek and French forms. Leaf is derived from the same letters transposed, Foil, Leaf. It's just the letters are in a different order. And you can see there's a little bit difference of the vowels. From the same root, we may conclude that the word loaf arises. The bread made in early times and in eastern lands was in the form of a broad, thin cake, like Scotch oatmeal cakes. These cakes were struck against the side of the oven and so baked. From their thin leaf-like form came the word loaf. This gives us also, I believe, the derivation of the word bread from loaf to bread, and that might seem like a stretch, but you have to remember the F is like the letter pay, and the pay can be an F or a P, like a PH or a P, and that P is often changed into a B, especially when it goes into the Greek language. So the F becoming a P or a B, and then you add the R from the Chaldean mixture, or the L becomes an R, and then you just have an added D there, which sometimes happened to other words, or it was a suffix that may have been added. But it says it comes from Brod or broad. In German, the word broad signifies both loaf and bread. The botanic word frond, taken from the Latin, is derived from the Hebrew fraud, which is pay resh dalet right here, pay resh dalet, which I was telling you before, that can be a P or it can be the PH, which makes the F sound. It means to spread, N being added, as frequently is the case to strengthen the root. And you'll see a few more examples of that throughout this chapter and a lot more in the book itself. The English berry has its origin in the Hebrew peri, Pei Resh Yod, which again the P becomes a B, which means fruit in general. Our word fruit in the French represented by the same letters, in Spanish fruto, in the Italian frutta or frutto, yeah, is derived through the Latin fructus from the Hebrew faruch, which is pe resh chet faruch, which means to bud or blossom. The Greek opora is evidently the offspring of the first of the two words. It signifies tree fruits, as pears, apples, grapes, etc. Observe the O at the commencement, not an uncommon addition in Greek. Our word branch takes its rise from barach, to reach across, a bar, a crossbeam, N being added, as in former instances, to strengthen the root. Bark is derived from book, to roll round. The R is added by the Kasdim, which means the Babylonian influence. Hence comes our book, which was formerly a roll or scroll. Sap owes its origin to the Hebrew zab, to flow, and that would be Zion bet or Zaudi bet, one of the two, probably Zion bet. Gum, from the Hebrew gam, gimel mem, to join together. Hence the Greek gamos is marriage. The Old English wart, in German ruse or warus, in Swedish ort, in French vert or verd, in Latin viridis, is derived from the Hebrew yarok, to be green. And that I know viridian is a type of green, but I wasn't familiar with the rest of these. It says the first letter here is generally rendered into English by W. Then the vowel O is taken out of its place in order to follow the W. Here is another example of a word of two syllables in Hebrew being shortened into one in English. The term wart is familiar to botanists as forming an association with many names of plants: starwort, mugwort, spleenwort. The final K has apparently become T in English to distinguish it from work. Section 2, Trees. Let us now turn to the names of trees. The ash with us signifies a special kind of tree. In Hebrew, etza, right, aza, which is ayin zaudi, is the general name for tree. The word elm, as denoting a kind of tree, is widely spread. The Dutch has olm, the German ulim or ulmi, the Swedish alm, the Danish alm, the Spanish olmo, the Russian ilma or ilina, and the Latin ulmus. Whence are all these names derived? From the Hebrew alone, an oak, and that would be aleph, lamed, wa, noon. You drop the wa and the N becomes an M. That's where you get the elm there. The common people sometimes pronounce the English word elum, which elun is right there, which is nearer to the Hebrew than our more civilized pronunciation. The change of N into M is common enough. It furnishes another example of a Hebrew word of two syllables being shortened into one, which happens in many cases in English. It becomes, they want to simplify the way things are pronounced or how it is spoken in the language. You'll find simplification and ease of speaking is one of the common principles in how the language has changed over time. It says, from the same root comes the Latin alnus, the alder. The teal tree is derivable from ashil, Arabic atil, a species of tamarisk. And you literally just drop the A there. An Asher pine tree is in Hebrew Aron, the ayin resh noon here. You have the number two, or that's aleph, sorry, resh noon, Oren. And you can see here, this is another example of the aleph not making an A sound. Like I was telling you, the aleph and the ayin were fluid in the vowel sounds. It had certain rules, but it wasn't like English is specifically. English came from the Hebrew, but the way that the vowels function has changed over time. So I don't want you to confuse the two. The aleph is our letter A as the character, but the pronunciation of the vowels is a little different. So you'll see here, the Masoretic pronunciation is Oren, Oren, all right? Arn, Oren. The mountain ash in Latin is Ornis, Ornis. So you see, it's the same thing. You drop the E there and you add the Latin suffix, which would have made it a masculine pronunciation, by the way. The Scotch have transposed the letters and call the tree rowan or roan, the R and O being transposed, like he said. R cypress, in Latin cupressius, in Greek caroparisis or parisios, is evidently the progeny of the Hebrew gopher, the Gimel Pei Resh. Gimel Pei Resh. Gimel, which the Greek doesn't use the K or the G sound, it made a K, which the Latin became a C. And that's the same character as the Gimel, but turned backwards, right? It became the letter C for the Latin. But the gopher wood is the cypress, and that's the same from the wood of which Noah's ark was made. Our aspen, the underside of whose leaves is white, takes its name from the Hebrew Sheba, which signifies hoary or elderly. And you can see that is down here. Sheen, Yod, Beit, Hey. The word shub or teshuva is to return, and shub is to go around again and again and like an old man. And that's what this is when it means hoary, because it's someone who's come around again and again many times. But that's where they get the word Sheba here. And when you transpose that, when you put the letter for this vowel in front and this letter back here, the B becomes a P. It's aspen, and then you add the N there. Aspen, right? So it says the internal vowel is transferred to the commencement, and as all allow, the B and P are letters closely related. This is another thing that Stephen Collins talks about in his books when he talks about the Parthian or Parthia being the county or the district of the covenant, because Brit and Parth is the same word, P and B interchangeable, right? The thorny slough of our hedges owes its name to the Hebrew sloan, which means a thorn. The common willow is a curious example of the transposition of letters. The willow in Hebrew is oriv, which is right here, number six, ayin resh beit. That's also erev. That's like the word for evening or to become dark. It's also the word for raven. And you can see it is here the word for a willow. But it says, we have taken the letters in reverse and out of Vero, where you have it backwards, we formed willow. The change of V into W and R into L being quite according to rule, meaning it's a common practice that happens in the transfer of languages. The holly takes its name from its prickly leaves, that which pierces, being in Hebrew cholel. And that word cholel, it's to profilate there's a whole bunch to this word that has a lot to do with what we've done to our Mashiach as well, and that it's attached to the holly tree is significant. I imagine that was intentional 100%. Our word juniper, in Latin juniperus, Italian junipero, comes from the Hebrew uh, zuper. It's the zadi pei resh, zuper. Okay, it's not a J, but a TZ or a TS, which signifies nails and sharp points. Its foliage is very sharp pointed, as most are aware. The N is added here to strengthen the root, as in many other cases. The additional letter produces a third syllable for ephony's sake. That's for the pleasingness of its sound. Okay. The fur is called brush or brush right here, bet resh wa sheen, in the sacred tongue. Hence also our frus. Remember, the B becomes a P and the P becomes an F, right? And the Z being dropped are fur, right? And I think also our barrage. Cedar might by some be traced to the Hebrew kedar, dark, as if its title were derived from its foliage. But methinks it more truly owes its name to the root kiotar, and that's with the kof tet resh right here, kof tet resh, kutar, which the Q being a K being a C, just like you saw with the Greek making the gimel a K that became a C, is a phenomenon that happens when you change the language. So that is quite possibly where that came from, like you said. But that kutar is perfume, owing to the fragrance of its wood. Hence is derived the citron. From this word comes the wine of the heathen mighty ones, nectar, the perfumed. When you have the N and the letters transposed there, you see. Hence also our nectarine, the fruit of fragrance. Whence comes our mistletoe? The diversion, I suppose, is rather startling, as it would seem to account for the freedoms to which it gives license. And remember, license is permission to do that which is otherwise unlawful, right? But it says it accounts for the freedoms to which it gives license at the wrong time of the year. There are certainly Mishal To in Hebrew means Lord of Misrule. And that's actually a title that they used during that time for some of their pagan practices. The Lord of Misrule was the fool or the clown that would be in charge for the day and have rule over even the king. That's where Mishal To or mistletoe comes from. Section 3, plants. Let us now turn to some plants. Crocus is clearly from the Hebrew crocum, which is right here, crocum, kof, like the kaf K, resh, kaf, mem, which indicates the herb saffron, one of the Corcus tribe. Camphor and or camphor is from Kafu or the henna of the East, whence also is derived the Greek keuporus or keupros. The M is a complementary letter, which is added by several languages before P and F, of which we shall see other examples. Thence also our caper plant, and I suppose our clover. The R and L, right? Or yeah, the P would become an L there for some reason. The herb cumin and the spice cinnamon are simply transferred into other languages from the Hebrew. The word cane has a very wide field of meaning. It is nearly the same in most languages, In Hebrew, Kasdim, Syriac, and Arabic, Kene, it becomes in Latin and Greek, Kana, the French Cain, the Welsh Can or Cain, and the Spanish Cana. Portuguese Cana, Italian Cana, and Armenian Canang. The Hebrew for plant is natito, hence our nettle. Rush takes its name from the Hebrew rosh, to tremble. Our reed in Saxon hariod is derived from harad, to tremble. From the same root springs the Latin arundo, which also means a reed. And it's the one that trembles in the wind, right? Number seven there is chesh, resh, dalet, harad. And that heavy guttural would soften there, hariod right there, and they drop that for just reed eventually. Our grass is clearly derived from gazar, or gazer, to cut off. Hence, it was originally applied to hay. The last, or the two last letters are transposed. From the same source comes our cress. The gross or fruse arises, as we may see, from another root, which is grus right here. Gross, gimel, resh, sheen. Our English mellow or mullein take their rise from the root maluah, which in Job 30, verse 4 is translated mellow. The Latins, Spaniards, and Italians call the plant melva. The Greeks made the last letter of the Hebrew root hard and called it melachi or melachi. The harsh tasted rue derives its name from the root ro, which signifies evil, and that would be resh ayin. By the Latins and Italians, it was called ruta, and its name in many other languages is nearly the same. Our rose, in Latin, Italian, and Spanish, rosa, repeated in nearly the same sound through most languages. Whence comes its name? From the Hebrew rosa, which is resh zadi he, rosa, right? To give pleasure, beautiful. In Eden, Elohim threatened, thorns also and thistles shall the ground bring forth to you. And the words used are in Hebrew, kuz and dardar. Do not these words reproduce themselves in English as couch and daughter? Couch grass is a weed well known to the farmer as extremely troublesome. And dodder is a parasitical creeper, very destructive to hops, flax, and clover, and other plants. The flower balsam derives its name from the Hebrew basam, which signifies to smell aromatically. The strengthening L was added by the Greeks and Romans. In their language, it signified the fragrant resin of the balsam tree, hence also our spice and mace. Whence comes the word hyssop, in Latin hyssopus, in Greek hyssosopus, from the Hebrew izob, which is aleph, zion, wa, bait, all right, which signifies the caper plant. In Arabic, its name is asuf. So you can see izob can also become asuf, where the B becomes a P, becomes an F right there. And then the Z and S are interchangeable. A TZ can become an S, a Z, or a T on occasion. Right here, we're on section 4. This is vegetables. Shall we look at some of the names of our vegetables? Our squash springs from the root quasha, a cucumber. And that's quasha, kof, shin, aleph. Our cucumber and the Latin cucumis from the Hebrew kilion, a gourd. Hence the R interposed by the Chaldean comes our Grekin. The Latin cucurbita clearly signifies from two, or springs rather, from two Hebrew words. Kirkur, round, circur, where we get our word circle, right? Or there you get circus, but it's round, and abtah, abtah, right? A gourd or melon. And they have curcubita or cucurbita there. From the first of these roots, we get the Latin cicer or vetch, a vetch. The English pumpkin is clearly traceable to the Hebrew pokua, a wild gourd. The M and P are complementary letters. The cabbage, with its many leaved heart, takes its name from kabaz, to gather together, a heap. The leek is derived from lei, green or succulent. The onion derives its name from its resemblance, when cut through, to the eye, which is the Hebrew oin, right? O-I-N, iron, and it's like the iron on. So it's like an eye like. It's also it irritates the eye when you cut it, right? The hop, ivy, and pea appear to be derived from different pronunciations of the root opa or opi, to grow luxuriantly, whence are derived our words turnip and parsnip. The last syllable speaks a common source. The first springs from the Hebrew dor, tur, which the D and T are interchangeable, to be round, and nib or nip, a plant. The second is paras, a horse. It is the horsewort. So we apply the terms horse chestnut and horse radish. We read in scripture of the algum as the wood of a very precious tree. The root seems clearly to reappear in the Latin legunum or legumen and the French and English legume. From this, I believe, comes our mahogany. The cereals whence man derives his principal food take their origin from the same source, whence comes the English wheat, the Saxon Hoete, the Gothic Huit, the German Weizen, the Swedish Hvit, the Danish Hvede or Hvede, the Dutch wheat. Max Muller says, from the root white. But will that stand comparison with the Hebrew chata, chata, which signifies wheat? This origin Webster gives it in his dictionary, while Parkhurst has previously traced it to this root. Very remarkable it is in such connection to see that in the Old Saxon the H preceded the W, as so also in several of the allied languages. All of those were branches of Hebrew that were split off from one another and changed over time individually. Most of those are what we call the Germanic branches of the language there. What is the origin of the word rye? I should say the Hebrew ra'o, fodder, and that would be ra'o, resh, ayin, hay. Whence comes our words corn and grain? From the Hebrew Quran, that's Karen, right? Quran, a horn. That's Kof Resh Nun. Our word rice has its compeers in the French riz, Italian ris, Spanish and Portuguese arroz, German riz, or ris, Dutch Rijst, and Danish Riz. Latin and Greek oreza. Do not all these spring from the Hebrew raz, which is raz, resh, aleph, sheen, which means a head. Its ear greatly resembles that of barley. The Hebrew for lentils is odes. Thence are derived our English oats, and with the V prefixed to iron, the word vetch. The Hebrew for barley is shoor, whence brings by the Kasdim substitute of T for S our word tear. What is peculiar in the barley? Its drooping head. If we turn its letters into Hebrew, it becomes weary corn or bar lay. Leah meaning weary or droopy for her eyes, right? And then bar is corn. While maize or Indian corn, the strongest in stem of all the cereals, takes its name from maaz, to be strong, whence comes our word farina, from the Latin far, which signifies all corn which is made into bread. In Greek, the answering word is peuros, whence are both derived. From the Hebrew bar, the B becoming a P there, which signifies corn. The Latin hordeum, barley, is derived from horde, to tremble. Section 5, Fruits. Shall we take a glance at the names of some of our fruits? Whence comes our word fig? With its cognates in Latin, ficus, Italian fico, Spanish figo, French figu, German fig, and Dutch vig. From the Hebrew fag or pei gimel. It could be fig too. The vowels are interchangeable there, right? A fig. Cantillations or Song of Songs, chapter 2, verse 13. The pomegranate in Hebrew is Ramon. Right here, Resh Mem Wa Nun, Ramon. Hence springs are lemon by transposition, melon. Our almond seem to be derived from arnam or arman, a plane tree. In Hebrew, the word for grape may be written gnab. From these letters, grape would easily spring. You just see the B becomes a P, right? The first letter in the Hebrew word for is ayin, that singular one which is sometimes written with a G, as in Gaza, Gomorrah. Whence do we obtain the word raisin, which in French and Irish is spelt in the same way. In Dutch, raisin, in German, Rosin. Does it not clearly take its origin from the Hebrew harazin, which means a kernel? A cluster of grapes is in Greek botrus or bortus, in Hebrew parot. So you see the P becomes a B, or the B, sorry, becomes a P, and the T and R are switching their places. Here are the same consonants transposed, right? Whence comes our word peach? If I mistake not, from nepech, a citron. Here the commencing N is lost, that being, as we have observed, the most unstable letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The tamarisk and tamarind evidently derive their two first syllables from the Hebrew tamar, a palm. It's also the word for the date, right? The fruit of a palm. The last syllable of tamarisk is probably derived from shach, to be low, the low palm as distinguished from the lofty tree properly called the palm. The tamarind would be the Indian palm, or the tamar from India, right? The Hebrew word nut is buten. We seem to have taken our word from this, omitting the first letter and transposing the two last. We generally regard our word raspberry as derived from rasp, a species of file, because of the roughness of the fruit. So Webster gives it, but may it not be taken from the Hebrew rasp, a red hot coal, and that would be resh shin pei, or resh sin pei, right? A red hot coal. Certainly, the color of the ripe fruit greatly countenances the idea. Still, if we take its name from the file-like instrument, that also springs by transposition from the Hebrew zarap, to purify, and that would be zarap, zaudi, resh, pei. And that would be the end of chapter 2. So thank you all for your time. I'm happy to have been able to read that, and we'll get to the next one as soon as we can. You have a great one until then.